All right. Welcome, Suki Hontu, dear Dharma friends. Today, we're going to begin with our lecture 2 or lecture 19 in your whole series. We're going to start off with part 1, which is Ananda, the disciple of the Buddha. Right? Here you can see the statue, the head of Ananda. It is once part of a limestone sculpture from the northern Xiantanshan caves, Northern Qi dynasty, from the 550 to 577 CE in modern Hebei province. So this is an actual statue of Ananda's Buddha's head. All right, our content for today, very briefly, we're going to touch base on introduction of Ananda, and then attending to the Buddha, how he became the Buddha, the duties of Ananda, the ways of Ananda, the praises of Ananda, the contributions of Ananda, and I believe these will be the topics for the exam questions. So please pay attention to that. And then briefly on Ananda's slides, we're going to touch base on the ordination of Maha Pajapati Gotami and the Parinibbana of the Buddha during the Ananda's time, and after the Maha Parinibbana of the Buddha. And lastly, the appendices, which these are all additional slides which you can go through at your own leisure. So I won't be going through the appendices. All right. So we're going to begin with the Ayasma Ananda Thera introduction. So Ayasma Ananda, from the 5th to the 4th century BCE, is one of the most loved figures in Buddhism. In Pali and Sanskrit, the word Ananda means bliss, joy, or happiness. He was the first cousin of the Buddha by their fathers. He was the primary attendant of the Buddha and one of his 10 principal disciples. He took care of the Lord Buddha for 25 years until the Buddha's Parinibbana. Among the Buddha's many disciples, he was known for having the best memory, erudition, and compassion, and was often praised by the Buddha for these matters. Most of the texts of the early Buddhist Sutta Pitaka are attributed to his recollection of the Buddha's teaching during the first Buddhist council. For that reason, he is known as the treasurer of the Dhamma, or in Pali, Dhamma Banda Garika, with Dhamma referring to the Buddha's teaching. So in 20 years in the Buddha ministry, Ayasma Ananda was selected by the Buddha to be his personal attendant, and he accompanied the Buddha on most of his wanderings. He performed his duties with great devotion and care, and acted as the intermediary between the Buddha and the lay people, as well as the Sangha. The Buddha sometimes asked Ayasma Ananda to substitute for him as a teacher, and then later stated that he himself, the Buddha, would not have presented the teachings in any other way, right? He is the subject of a specific public praise delivered by the Buddha just before the Buddha's Parinibbana, as mentioned in the Maha Parinibbana Sutta in the Digha Nikaya, DN 16. He had an important role in establishing the order of Bhikkhunis when he requested the Buddha on behalf of the Buddha's foster mother, Maha Pajapati Gotami, to allow her to be ordained. He also accompanied the Buddha in the last year of his life, and therefore was witness to many tenets and principles that the Buddha conveyed before his death, including the well-known principle that the Buddhist community should take his teaching and disciple as their refuge, and that the Buddha would not appoint a new leader. So shortly after the Buddha's death, the Buddhist council was convened, presided by Arahant Maha Kassapa Thera and 500 Arahants. During the eve of the council, Ayasma Ananda managed to attain enlightenment, which was a requirement. He had a historical role during the council as the living memory of the Buddha, reciting many of the Buddha's discourses and checking them for accuracy. During the same council, however, he was chastised by Arahant Maha Kassapa Thera and the rest of the Sangha for allowing women to be ordained and failing to understand or respect the Buddhas at several crucial moments. So this is a picture rendering of the first Buddhist council around 400 BCE at the Satapatthana cave of the Vibhara Hills and Rajagaha in modern Bihar, India. So Ayasma Ananda continued to teach until the end of his life, passing on spiritual heritage to his pupils, especially Sanavasi, the name of the disciple, among others, who later assumed leading roles in the second and third Buddhist council. Right? So Ayasma Ananda died 20 years after the Buddha, and stupas were erected on the river Rohini near Vesali, or the Ganges where he died. So if you can look at this map, Vesali is located here, right? And Bodh Gaya as indicated in this old ancient map. And this is the Venerable Ananda Stupa in Vesali. So let's look at the next chapter, Ayasma Ananda Thera attending to the Buddha. So, as Buddha's personal attendant, right? So, see, for the first 20 years of his life, the Buddha had no personal attendant. The few temporary attendants were not very dutiful. Some chose to go where they pleased. Some even dropped the Buddha alms bowl or rope on the ground. So they were not very effective as attendants. In the 20th year, when he was 55, the Buddha made known to his disciples that he would like to have a permanent attendant. The Venerable Sariputta and Maha Moggallana both volunteered the services, but the Buddha didn't accept, as they had other valuable services to perform for the world. So the other bhikkhus offered the services, but they were not suitable except Ananda. As Ananda was silent, waiting to be nominated by the Buddha himself, so other monks advised him to offer his services. And they asked Ananda, why don't you offer your services? But the Buddha said, it is not necessary for Ananda to be induced by others. He will serve me on his own accord. So now Ayasma Ananda agreed. So to become the Buddha's attendant, but he said he had 8 conditions. And what are the 8 conditions? So the first 4 were negative in character. So he said, the master, referring to the Buddha, the master should never pass a gift of robes onto him. The master should never give alms food, which he himself had received. The master, having received a dwelling place, he should never give it to him. The master should never include him in any personal invitations, such as an occasion for teaching the Dhamma, when a meal would be offered. Then the other 4 were were positive in character. If he was invited to a meal, he asked for the right to transfer this invitation to the Buddha. If people come from outlying areas, from outstation or from far away, he asked for the privilege to lead them to the Buddha. If he had any doubts or inquiries about the Dhamma, he asked for the right to have them cleared up at any times. And if the Buddha gave a discourse during his absence, he asked for the privilege to have it repeated to him privately. So as you can see, these are the 8 conditions. 4 were negative, 4 were positive. So take note of these 8 conditions. So Ananda explained his reasons for this request in this way. If he did not pose the first 4 conditions, then people could say that he had accepted the post of attendant only because of material gains he would enjoy by living so close to the master. So got special privilege, so to speak. But he did not express the other 4 conditions. Then it would rightly be said that he fulfilled the duties of this post without being mindful of his own advancement on the noble path. So the Buddha granted him these very reasonable requests, which were quite in accordance with the Dhamma. So from there on, Ayasma Ananda was the constant companion, attendant, and helper of the Blessed One for 25 years of service. So in this little black box, you can see JA means Jataka story. Jataka number 456 of Junha Jataka, the story about the king named Junha. Right? So you can read about these Jataka stories, right? And just an excerpt. In the present time, the Buddha is growing older and is looking for a permanent attendant. Okay, so all are willing, but the Buddha turns them down. Venerable Ananda says he will do it if he is granted 8 boons, and he is chosen. So the Buddha then tells the story of how a Brahmin had asked for several boons from a king in the past and had been granted his heart desire. So the Bodhisattva is the king of Benares, or they call it Raja, and the Ananda name was Brahmin. So meaning to say is that it was not just this occasion. In the past, it's also the same. Right? So it is the karma, so to speak. So one of the virtues of Ayasma Ananda that established his fame was his conduct as the Buddha's upataka, his personal attendant. Upataka means his personal attendant. The Buddha praised him as the best of all attendants, the foremost of all those monks who had ever filled his post. So he's the best personal attendant. He reflected on the way he served the Buddha through the last third of his life. Verses of Arahant Ananda can be read in Theragatha's verse 17.3. Okay, so during this time, though he was still a learner, right? Remember, he was not an Arahant yet. He was a learner, one in the higher training. One in the higher training means he had attained a stream entry level already, right? A Sekha, right? No thoughts of lust or hate arose in him, right? So basically, the implication was that his close connection with the Buddha and his devotion to him gave no room for this. Too busy, So only such a man, right, with such a noble man of like Ananda, Ayasma Ananda, only such men could fill the post of a constant companion, an attendant of the awakened one. So you can read in this Theragatha, okay, this 1044 to 1045, 1046, 1047, 1048, right? So in a way, they say for 25 years, I live as a trainee in the Dharma, but still, even a thought of sensual pleasures didn't arise in me at all during that period. Okay, see the excellence of the Supreme Dhamma. So for 25 years, I live as a trainee in this Dhamma, right? So even the thought of anger didn't arise in me. For 25 years, right, I served the Blessed One with bodily actions of loving kindness. For 25 years, I served the Blessed One with words of loving kindness. Right? For 25 years, I served the Blessed One with thoughts of loving kindness. Like so, you can see these are the verses that he reflected on. So what were the duties of Ayasma Ananda? So he brought the water, the Buddha water for washing his face, and tooth wood. Tooth wood is like toothpick, or toothpick for cleaning his teeth. Those days got no toothbrush. Arrange his seat, washed his feet, massaged his back, fanned him, swept his cell, and mended his robes. Right? So these are the trivial duties of Ananda. But apart from that, he slept nearby at night. Why? He slept nearby at night where the Buddha was resting, right? To be always on hand, to prevent his sleep from being disturbed. Right? Such a very dedicated, responsible duties. He accompanied him on his grounds through the monastery. Right? This is indicated in the Vinaya. Right? This is part of Vinaya 1-94. And after meetings, he checked to see whether any monk had left anything behind. Any dedicated teacher would do that. They check and see anything left behind. He carried the Buddha's messages, also indicated in Vinaya 1-5, and called the monks together, even sometimes at night. at midnight. Yeah? This is in verses Jataka 148 in the Sigala Jataka, the story about the greedy jackals. So you can read in this little box here. In the present, 500 monks who have recently left the lay life are seized by lust. When the Buddha understands this, he preaches about the dangers of three evils, the three evil thoughts, right? The lobha, dosa, moha, sensuality, ill will, and cruelty, and tells the story of a jackal who was so greedy he lost all his hair, almost lost his life. So monks never let desires take root in the heart, but pluck them out wheresoever they spring up. So having preached the four truths, right, at close, whereof those 500 monks became an arahant, and the rest won varying lesser degrees in emancipation. So the teacher identified the Jataka as follows. I myself, the jackal of those days. So that was a Jataka story. The jackal was the Bodhisattva himself. So very greedy jackal. So you can read about that. I believe that you have a Jataka stories, and you can see the link there. Point number E. So when the Buddha was sick, he obtained medicine for him. Once, when monks neglected a very sick fellow monk, the Buddha and Ayasma Ananda washed him and together carried him to a resting place. In this way, he performed the many daily tasks and cared for the physical well-being of his enlightened cousin. A cousin here means the monk in the community, like a good mother or a caring wife. On another occasion, when the monks named Girimananda and Paguna were sick, so these two monks were sick, Ayasma Ananda asked the Buddha to visit them and strengthen them with talk on the Dhamma. So you can also read this in the Girimanda Sutta, the discourse of Girimananda Thera in AN 10.60, right? So Venerable Girimananda is sick, and the Buddha encourages Venerable Ananda to visit him and speak of the 10 perceptions. As Venerable Girimananda heard these 10 perceptions, his disease was allayed, right? So then he recovered from his disease, right? So I'm sure some of you may have, recited this Girimananda Sutta before, right, in the temples. Then Panguna Sutta in AN 6.56. The Buddha consoles Venerable Panguna on his deathbed, and he dies at peace. The Buddha then explains to Venerable Ananda the 6 benefits of hearing the teaching at the right time and examining the meaning at the right time. So it was very beneficial for this Venerable Panguna to listen to a Dhamma talk by the master himself at the right time. And after that, he died peacefully. So wonderful. Asava Sutta, defilements in AN 6.58. The Buddha explained the diverse methods of overcoming diverse kinds of defilements. Right? So that is just a side note. Now continue. He also served as a good secretary, ensuring smooth communication between the thousands of monks and the master. So together with Arahant Sariputta Thera and Arahant Maha Moggallana Thera, he tried to sort out and attend to the manifold problems of human relationship turning up in a community. So don't think that during those days, the monastic in the community, they're all very peaceful, right? But there are also problems within the community. So thank goodness we have Venerable Ananda, a very effective, secretary who can sort out any problems in the monastery. In the case of a dispute of the monks of Kosambi, you can see read in this sutta AN 4.249, and in the case of a Sikhism in the Sangha through Devadatta in Udana 5.8 and in the Vinaya, Ayasma Ananda played the important role in clarifying and keeping order. Often, he was the go-between of the monks, getting an audience with the master for them. So if he cannot solve the problem, he will bring all of them to the master. Or he brought the Buddha's words to members of other sects, right? So he refused no one and felt himself to be a bridge rather than a barrier. Right? So he was a go between, right? Anything. So you can read in this Bahukara Sutta, very helpful, AN 4.249. Yeah? Mendicants is another word for monks or bhikkhus. These four things are very helpful to a human being. What for? Okay, associating with good people, listening to true teaching, proper attention, and practicing in line with the teaching. These four things are very helpful to a human being. In another sutta, Ananda Sutta, Udana 5.8, thus I have heard. Right? So as you can see, Udana always starts with thus I have heard. Venerable Ananda told Lord Buddha that he met Bhikkhu, Devadatta, and their conversation. From this day on, friend Ananda, I will do the Upasata and task concerning the monastic code of discipline, apart from the Blessed One and the community of monks. Then, on realizing the ungratefulness of evil people, the Blessed One on that occasion exclaimed, so it is easy to do good things for good person. However, it is very difficult for an evil person to do good things. An evil person can do evil things easily. However, noble ones with developed minds can never do evil. Sounds very, right? Very beneficial. Ayasma Ananda sometimes literally risked his life for his teacher, and his willingness to sacrifice himself is worth mentioning. Why is that so? The rebellious monk Devadatta tried to kill the Buddha by having a drunk and wild elephant released in the Buddha's presence. Then again, Ayasma Ananda stepped in front of the Buddha to protect him, even when the Buddha told him to step back 3 times, but he refused. The Buddha moved him aside through a supernatural powers and subdued the elephant by touching it and speaking it with a loving kindness. Right? Only the Buddha can do it, huh? Not anybody else, with his supernatural powers. The Buddha told the other monks that already the 4 former lives of Ayasma Ananda had shown himself equally by willing to sacrifice himself. So other recorded Jataka stories you can find in 502, 533, 534, 501, and 222. These are all the Jataka stories of how he was willing to sacrifice himself, not only now with this wild elephant, but even before that. So now we look at the qualities of Ayasma Ananda. Ayasma Ananda was attractive in person, very handsome and good looking. So in a Pali account related that a nun, a Bhikkhuni, even a nun, a Bhikkhuni, became captivated by Ayasma Ananda, because of his, pleasant face. And she pretended to be ill to have him visit her. When she realized the error of her ways, she confessed her mistake to Ayasma Ananda. Other accounts relate that a low-caste woman, called Praktik, she fell in love with Ayasma Ananda and persuaded her mother, Matangi, to use black magic spell to enchant him. This succeeded, and Ayasma Ananda was lured into her house, but came to his senses and called upon the help of the Buddha. So the Buddha then taught Praktik to reflect on the repulsive qualities of the human body, and eventually this woman was ordained as a Bhikkhuni, giving up her attachment for Ayasma Ananda. So Ayasma Ananda was said to be a modest, quiet man who was completely devoted to the Buddha. He also was said to have exceptional memory, as we all know. He could recite every sermon of the Buddha word for word. after hearing it only once. I hope, I wish we could have that kind of capacity. Yeah. He is credited with persuading the Buddha to ordain women into the Sangha. But he was slower than other disciples to realize enlightenment. But he did so only after the Buddha's parinibbana. Right? So in this line, this sentence says that he was very excellent in other things, but he was very slow compared to the others to realize enlightenment, becoming an arahant. So all along, he was a stream enterer until after the Buddha's parinibbana. Praises for Ananda. Tatiya Dhamma Sutta, Bad Principles. Right? Third, AN 10.115. Ayasma Ananda praise has been voiced on many occasions in the Pali Canon. Right? The greatest recognition for a monk would surely have been when the Buddha, the master, the teacher, asked him to substitute for him as a teacher. Wow, isn't it a great honor? And the Buddha asked Ayasma Ananda, no, you come and teach on my behalf. And then later confirmed that he himself would not have presented the teachings in any other way. A similar high esteem is shown in the fact that monks to whom the Buddha had given a short discourse would ask an experienced monk to explain the teaching more fully. The Venerable Maha Kachana was a master in this, and so were the Venerable Sariputta and Ananda. So in the later syllabus, we will look at Maha Kachana and Sariputta. And for this, what it says that usually sometimes Buddha will give a very short stanza, and then he left. And then the bhikkhus, the monks, were left in a lurch to say that, oh, okay, I'm not sure what the Buddha was saying. So then they thought, let's go to Venerable Maha Kachana or Venerable Ananda, because they surely would be able, to explain further. And that's where, they have been praised for that. So let's look at this in this little black box here. The Buddha addressed the monks as an example. Mendicants, you should know bad principles and good principles, and you should know bad results and good results. Knowing this, you practice. Your practice should follow the good principles with good results. So when this was spoken, the Holy One, the Buddha, got up from his seat and entered his dwelling. Right? So then what happened? Then the monks consider, this Venerable Ananda is praised by the Buddha and esteemed by his sensible spiritual companions. He is capable of explaining the meaning of this brief passage for recitation given by the Buddha. Let's go to him and ask him about this matter. And he answers. So we'll remember it. So then the monks, when approached Ananda, so what are bad principles? What are good principles? What are bad results? And what are good results? So Venerable Ananda replied, wrong view is bad principle. Right view is good principle. And the many bad unskillful qualities produced by wrong view are bad results. And the many skillful qualities fully developed because of right view are good results. Wrong thought is a bad principle. Right thought is a good principle. So the sutta, continues. So then the monks later related to the Blessed One. So meaning, after when Venerable Ananda has explained, so usually the monks will go back to the Buddha and, recap to the Buddha. So then they say to the Blessed One, then the Blessed One said, good, mendicants, Ananda is astute. He has great wisdom. If you come to me and ask me this question, I would answer it exactly the same way as Ananda. That is what it means. And that's how you should remember it. Right? So you see how, how should I say that, how reflective is Ayasma Ananda. So in the Bahitika Sutta, the important is Majjhima Nikaya. Besides the equal status, Venerable Ananda to the master. Remember, who was the disciple who is the most similar to the master? It's none other than Venerable Sariputta. I believe this is one of the exam questions in objective. So Besides the equal status Venerable Ananda had in this respect with Venerable Sariputta, there were occasions when the Buddha specially praised Venerable Ananda. He said, for instance, to the monks, that King Pasinadi, during that time, King Pasinadi was a royal patron of the Buddha, to whom Venerable Ananda had given a discourse, was very blessed because he had given the boon of the sight and company of Venerable Ananda. So basically, the King Pasinadi was also very happy with this, right? So in summary, okay, I read quickly. In summary, this discourse is an exchange of conversation between Venerable Ananda and King Pasinadi. The king asked Venerable Ananda what is defined as wholesome, kusala, and what is unwholesome, kusala, conduct of body, speech, and thought. The king also asked questions on the Buddha's behavior. King Pasinadi said, now, Venerable Ananda, does the Blessed One praise only the undertakings of all wholesome states? Venerable Ananda said, the Tathagata, great king, has abandoned all unwholesome states and possesses wholesome states. Being satisfied with the teaching, in return the king presented Venerable Ananda with a gift of a fine piece of cloth to thank his precious teaching, precious teaching from Venerable Ananda. The king says, this cloth of mine, Venerable Sir, which was sent to me, packed in a royal umbrella case by King Ajata Satu of Magadha, another king, 16 hands long and 8 hands wide. So you can imagine how long is that. You combine all the 16 hands and 8 hands together. Let the Venerable Ananda accept it out of compassion. Venerable Ananda said, it is not necessary, great king. My triple road is complete. After much persuasion, Ananda related the entire thing to the of it's a great gain for King Pasinadi of Kosala that he has had opportunity of seeing Pasinadi praised last day of the Buddha in the Nikaya DN16. It says, in a plea of these Ananda to present alone gives them joy. Imagine, you can feel into the hall, you feel joy. So this party of people, when you go and see Ananda, his presence here, when you walk into the room, his presence alone gives him joy. When he speaks Dharma to them, even better, there will be joy for them because of his words. And they are still not satisfied when Ananda reverts to silence. So after Ananda is finished, they are still not satisfied. I want to hear more. I want to listen more to Venerable Ananda. In answer to the question of a lay disciple, how he honor the Dharma, just reply was, holder, which Dharma honor because he is the guardian of the Dharma. Right. So whereupon the lay disciples invited Venerable Ananda to a meal and gave him a gift of valuable cloth. Right. So there you go. He is the guardian of the Dhamma. In the Sila Bhatta Sutta, precept and practice in the Anguttara Nikaya 3.78. Another time, the master praised him thus. After Venerable Ananda had answered a question of the Buddha and had left. So the Buddha said to the other monks, right? So after when Venerable Ananda answered, he left, then the Buddha addressed the monks. Monks, Ananda is still in training. Although he's still a trainer, in Pali called Seka, right? Although he's still in training, but it would not be easy to find his equal in discernment. Not easy to find such a person like Ananda. Such a good praise by the Buddha. In the Ajivaka Sutta to the Fatalist student, AN 3.72, a layman who had been following another teaching was converted to the Dharma after a talk with Venerable Ananda. At the end, he rejoiced How amazing it had been that Venerable Ananda had neither elevated his own teaching into the heavens nor dragged the other into the dirt. Now, what does that mean? Totally straightforward was the exposition of the Dhamma. The inner meaning was explained and he himself was not carried away. So in view of this abundance of praise, recognition and privileges, mutterings of envy and resentment could have been expected, but this was not the case at all. Ananda was a man who had no enemies. This is a rare advantage. Right? He had not come to him without a cause, but had been enjoyed by him not only by his life, but also in many previous existences. So what this statement here is, even though he has many praises, but Venerable Ananda did not carry. He is not, contributions Ayasma Ananda, guardian of the Dhamma. All the other leading disciples excel in only one category, or in the case of two monks. Okay, but the Buddha declared Bhikkhu Ananda foremost in 5 categories. Right? So remember this. All the other leading disciples excel in only 1 or 2 categories, but Venerable Ananda has 5 categories. The first one, Bahu Suttanam, one who had heard much of the Buddha's word. Right? Bahu Suttanam means one who had heard much of the Buddha's word. Because Venerable Ananda did not want anything for himself, he absorbed the discourses without resistance or distortion. He arranged them properly, knew what belonged together, recognized within different expressions the common denominator, and like a faithful and skilled registrar, could find his way around his mind. This is the quality of having heard much. He has heard much truth, and that means that he has erased all untruth in himself. Such a person is truly humble. So the Blessed One said to the monks, Ananda is still in training, but it would not be easy to find his equal in discernment. So you can read more about this in this sutta, Silabbata Sutta, in AN 3.76. So this is the first quality. Now the second quality, Satimatthana, or mindfulness, right? Mindfulness is the retention in mind and making use of the discourses heard and the application. He heard it and he applied in his own self-inquiry. Venerable Ananda possessed this ability to a phenomenal degree. He could immediately remember everything, even if he had heard it only once. So, second quality, mindfulness, retention in mind. The third quality, Gatimantana, refers to Venerable Ananda's capacity to master the sequential order. The first one was retention in mind. The third one is master the sequential order, or what was remembered. The Buddha said, because Venerable Ananda, who is delivered from the asavas, right? So he has eradicated all the asavas, means defilements, and he was able to let go of these hindrances at will. So he could concentrate completely on what he had heard. So if a person is has great mindfulness, right? So he has no hindrances. When you have no hindrances, right, his mind is very well concentrated, so he can remember. The fourth quality, Ditimantana, was his steadfastness, his energy, and unflagging dedication to the task of studying, memorizing, and reciting the Buddha's words, and in personally attending to the master, even though he can remember, right, his good memory, but he still continue to study, to memorize, and to recite, right, the Buddha's word. So his level of energy, right, is well praised. Unflagging dedication. So the fifth quality, Upatakana, was that of a perfect attendant, which was described earlier among those who attended to the master. Okay, so this is in Nivarana Pahana Sutta, abandoning the hindrances, in AN 1.19. All right, now Silabbata Sutta. I'm not going to go through this. You can pick up the sutta and you can read about this. Because I need to keep the time checked. In the Maha Gosinga Sutta, the longer discourse of the Gosinga. So very quickly, the Buddha was staying in the South Forest Park in Gosinga, together with several well-known senior disciples like Sariputta, Maha Moggallana, Maha Kassapa, Anuruddha, Revata, Ananda, and others. Then they all went to listen to the Dhamma taught by Venerable Sariputta. The question as to which monk lent radiance to the Gosina forest, you can see the forest there, was answered by each venerable. Ananda said, Ananda speaks of one who treasures what he has been taught and learns by heart the doctrines which declare the higher life in all its perfection and purity. But Venerable Revata said, Revata is of one who delights in meditation and lives in solitude. Anuruddha of one who possesses the celestial eye. Maha Kassapa of one living in the forest of a strenuous life recommends that life. Maha Moggallana is one who holds discussion with another on the Abhidhamma, and Sariputta of a monk who is a master of his heart and is not under his mastery. Right? So who is the monk which lent radiance to the Gosina forest? So they all went to seek the Buddhas and ask his opinion. And the Buddha praises everyone, all of them. He praises the opinion of each of the elders, but he himself would choose the monk who is delivered from the asavas, the defilements, right? Who is none other than Venerable Ananda. So then, in selecting Ayasma Ananda as the treasurer or guardian of his dispensation, the Buddha has chosen one whose personal qualities coincided perfectly with the demands of the post. Right? So what's the resume? Right? So there's also the demands for the post. So the qualities. By virtue of his devotion to learning, he was ideally suited to receive the manifold teachings delivered by the Buddha over the 45 years period. By virtue of his phenomenal memory, he could retain them in mind exactly as spoken by the master. By virtue of his sense of order, the sequential order, he could be relied on to preserve in the correct sequence and to explain them in such a way that the structure of ideas accorded with the Buddha's intention. By virtue of his steadfastness, his energy, his unflagging devotion, he would so endeavor that the pupils under his charge would receive teaching fully and be properly trained so that they in turn could pass them on to their own pupils. Right? So Ayasma Ananda was the model in his blameless conduct, in his untiring solicitude for the master and for the community of monks, in his unperturbable friendliness, his patience, and his readiness for help. Okay, so that's the qualities. So in this little box here, the 84,000, Buddhist traditions specify the number of recitation units, Dhamma Kanda. Literally means aggregates of Dhamma. In the Buddha's teaching, such as 84,000, and in one verse, Ananda claims to have received them all. He said, I received from the Buddha 82,000, and from the bhikkhus 2,000 more. Thus, there are 84,000 units, teachings that are set in motion. So this is in the Tathagata verse 1024. So next, quickly, we're going to move on to the ordination of Maha Pajapati Gotami, but this is going to be a very brief one. The ordination of Maha Pajapati Gotami. So when Buddha's foster mother, Maha Pajapati Gotami, saw that the Buddha had attained enlightenment, that some of the princes had taken refuge in the Buddha, and the king Suddhodana had died. She wanted to leave home to be a Bhikkhuni. So what it means here is, I'm sure you read the life of the Buddha. At that time, there's a lot of, princes, princess and princess, they gone forth and become bhikkhus. So then, after the King Suddhodana had passed away, so she herself wanted to be ordained. 3 times, right? She approached the Buddha and asked him to be ordained into the Sangha, but each time the Buddha refused. But the Buddha gave no reason. And then after that, the Buddha had stayed in Kapilavatthu a while, and then he journeyed back to Vesali. But she was not discouraged. She cut off her hair, wear yellow garments, went on foot to Vesali, accompanied by many other Sakya ladies, right, experiencing hardship. They have to walk many, many, many miles, thousands of miles. Weeping, not thousands, hundreds of miles. Weeping, they stood outside the Mahavana where the Buddha was residing. So Venerable Ananda, moved by the pathetic sight, appealed to the Buddha, and the Buddha was finally persuaded by the entreaties of Venerable Ananda on the condition that she accept the 8 chief rules, the Garudhamma, which we're going to study this in a short while. So by accepting these 8 chief rules, she and the second lady received the lesser and higher ordination, right? Because this is due to the efforts of Venerable Ananda that the Buddha allowed female to become Bhikkhunis. So the Bhikkhuni Sasana was founded in the 5th Vasana year of the Buddha. So the Parinibbana of the Buddha. So the last day of the Buddha, you can read in DN 16, is one of the most important with regards to the relationship of Venerable Ananda, right? So the Buddha reached his 80th year. So the 2 chief disciples, Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Moggallana, had predeceased him, meaning to say that they already died before the Buddha. And so had the son, Venerable Rahula, and the wife, the former wife, Yasodhara. So the sutta convey a special mood, the mood of painful parting. Why painful parting for Venerable Ananda? Remember, he wasn't an Arahant yet. So he still have, sensual feelings. It is also the first small beginnings of the decline of the Dhamma, which will gradually disappear and increase distance from the Buddha's lifetime. So in the 3rd chapter of the Maha Parinibbana Sutta, the Buddha requested Venerable Ananda to assemble the monks and address the assembly with the exhortation to learn and practice the path of enlightenment. The Buddha said that this holy life may endure long for the welfare and happiness of many, out of compassion for the world, for the good, the welfare, and the happiness of devas and humans. So at the end of the discourse, he announced, 3 months from now, the Tathagata's Parinibbana will take place. Can you imagine? He called Ananda to assemble all the bhikkhus, and then the Buddha mentioned this, and then he says that 3 months from now, Tathagata will enter Nibbana. Right? So there was that kind of mood. In the 5th chapter of the sutta, the Buddha gave detailed instructions about the cremation and the erection of the stupa. Right? Why? It happened because Venerable Ananda asked the Buddha, say, how do I make arrangements? So in the 5th chapter, the Buddha has mentioned, there were 4 beings worthy of a stupa: a supreme Buddha, Pajjeka Buddha, an Arahant disciple, and a world monarch. One who worshipped there would also attain much merit. Hearing this, Venerable Ananda, overpowered with grief, went aside, clapped the door jamb and wept. Right? Because again, he wasn't an Arahant, he was Sotapanna. Right? So he knew he still had to fight and conquer, and the master, who had so much compassion for him, would soon be no more. What do you mean by he had to fight and conquer? He had to fight and conquer his own, right? His own defilements. He has to eradicate all the factors and to become Arahant. So one of Venerable Arahant Ananda's concern was that what would become of the Sangha after he died. The Buddha said, Ananda, it would be that you will think the teacher's instruction has ceased. Now we have no teacher. It would not be seen like this, Ananda. For what I have taught and explained to you as Dharma and discipline will, at my passing, be your teacher. On one of the Buddha's final acts was to assemble the monks and speak to them about the insight and kindness of Ananda. And he told Ananda, do not sorrow, Ananda. Have I not told you many times that everything changes and vanishes? How could something that has come into being not be destroyed? For a long time, Ananda, you have attended on the Tathagata, gladly, sensitively, sincerely, and without reserve, with deeds, speech, and thoughts of loving kindness. You have made great merit, Ananda. Keep on striving, and soon you will be free from all the cankers. The cankers here means defilements, the asaras. Prior to the Buddha's final passing, Venerable Ananda said to the Buddha, "In the past, Lord, the monks in all directions, after ending the rain retreats, came to see the Tathagata. Thus we got to see and attend to the monks who inspired the heart. But now, after the Blessed is gone, we won't get to see or attend to the Buddha who inspired the heart." Then the Buddha gave Venerable Ananda another directive. There were 4 places in the world worthy of veneration, which would inspire a faithful follower. The birthplace of the Buddha, that's Lumbini, near Kapilavatthu. Lumbini now is in Nepal. The place of enlightenment, Bodh Gaya, near Uruvela. The place where he taught the law for the first time, that is Sarnath, near Benares. And the place of the final Nibbana, Kusinara. It is noteworthy that each of these places in the forest and in a near city, but never inside one. All those who would travel to visit these shrines with confident hearts would attain a heavenly rebirth. Right? So these are the 4 sacred places, holy places. In the 6th chapter of the sutta, the Buddha gave his final instruction to the monks never to think after his death that they no longer had a teacher, for the Dhamma and Vinaya will be the teacher after I have gone. Second, after his death, right? After his death, junior monks should use Venerable Sir or Bhante, and senior monks could address the junior ones as friend, Avuso. So as you can see, this rule affirmed reverence according to seniority in the order till to these days. Right? So as you can hear that we address Venerable Sir or Bhante. Third, the Buddha gave the monks permission to abolish the lesser and minor rules and all they entail according to their own judgment. The fourth and the last instruction was to impose the higher penalty, right, Bhamadanda, on the monk Channa. Right? Channa was his personal charioteer. Right? The Venerable Ananda was to fulfill all this direction imposed by the Buddha. Right? That this is all been recited in the 6th chapter of the Maha Parinibbana Sutta. So then after the Maha Parinibbana of the Buddha, Venerable Ananda said in this word about himself, "The friend, the master, has passed away. The master too has gone. There is no friendship now that equals this. The mindfulness directed bodywards. The old ones now have passed away. Old ones, Sariputta, the Buddha, Sariputta, Moggallana, everyone have passed away. The new ones do not please me much. Today alone I meditate, like a bird gone to its nest." That was the words by Venerable Ananda himself. On the 7th day, they erected a pyre for the cremation. When the neighboring clans heard the news of the master death, they all sent messengers to ask for the relics so they could erect stupas for them. Right? So as you can, this is, you can hear from the life of the Buddha, so I'm not going to go through this, but these 8 portions were allocated as follows. Is the little black box here. 1 to Aja Tasatu, the king of Magadha. 2 to the Lichavis of Vesali. 3 to the Sakas of the Kapilavastu. 4 to the bullies of Alakappa. 5 to the Koliyas of Ramagama. 6 to the Brahmin of Vetadipa. 7 to the Malas of Pawa. 8 to the Malas of Kosinara. And then the Dona. Dona is the Brahmin. Right? So he was the Brahmin who recommended or who suggested that to divide the relics into 8 portions. So Dona, the Brahmin, who made the division, received the vessel in which the body had been cremated. So after the funeral ceremonies was over, Venerable Ananda saw only one duty left to him, namely to attain liberation, as prophesied to him by the Buddha. The Venerable Maha Kassapa advised him, go and live in the forest in the province of the Kosala, which was near the Malas and the Sakans. Day and night, in the village, in the village and in the forest, Venerable Ananda had to console the lay disciples. I remember the Buddha had passed away recently, so a lot of lay disciples come and console. He has to console a lot of these lay disciples, and he was never alone. So how can he, be alone? So thereupon, a deity who lived in the forest appeared to him, was concerned about Venerable Ananda's spiritual progress, and he advised him, now that you have sat at the foot of a tree and in your heart, Nibbana, you have placed. So you said, right, your target is Nibbana. Meditate, Gotama, right, is a Gotama clan, son of the Gotama. Do not be negligent. What has this hurly-burly to do with you? Right? Hurly-burly, So hurly-burly is a phrase word. Don't be bothered about such things, right? Meditate, focus. So the Venerable Ananda, exhorted by the deity, was stirred again to a sense of urgency now. So you can read in this Ananda Sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya, SN 9.5. So then the first Buddhist council, right? In the meantime, so while Mahakassapa already told Venerable Ananda, go to the forest, go and meditate, right? And strive, attain Nibbana. So meanwhile, Venerable Mahakassapa has decided to call a council, right? The council of monks together to strengthen the teachings and the discipline. Because of the unsafe conditions in the country of Kosala, the country was to take place, the council was to take place in Satapani cave of the Vibhara hills in Rajagaha under the protection of King Ajatasattu. All living arahants, almost 500, were to take part, and in addition, Venerable Ananda, the only one who was non-arahant, right? He knew most of the discourses of the Buddha, and thereafter, thereafter, on the eve of the council, right, he attained arahantship. And I'm sure you have learned about this in your previous syllabus. So when the date set for the council came closer, Venerable Anuradha, right, suggested that his brother, right, Venerable Ananda, should only be admitted if he had overcome the last taints and had become an arahant. When Ananda heard this, he decided to employ every bit of his strength and ability to possess to realize Nibbana. So he practiced the 4 foundations of mindfulness, a way which came most naturally to him according to his tendency, right? To in the early hours in the morning, when he wanted to rest after his exertion, he knew without a doubt that he had attained release from all passion. So he had attained arahantship. The next day, the council began. A place had been kept for him. Venerable Ananda appeared through the air, right, through supernatural power, and sat down at his place. Then Venerable Anuradha and Venerable Mahakassapa became aware that he had become an arahant. They expressed brotherly joy with him and opened the council, which took place during the rains retreat. So the final years of Venerable Ananda, after the death of the Buddha, right, Venerable Mahakassapa, the most respected disciple, had taken over the guidance over the order. Right? So he seems to be the next person. He had, however, not the status of being a refuge, right, referring to Mahakassapa, as the Buddha had been, nor was he his deputy. He was simply the foremost of the monks with the 10 higher qualities. He was the symbol for the observance of Dharma and discipline of disciples. After him, after Venerable Mahakassapa, Venerable Ananda became the second leading elder, the second most venerated holy one, who was designated to look after the order. After he had already been a monk for over 40 years, he survived the Buddha another 40. When he reached 120 years of age, he felt his death was near. According to Pali sources, when Venerable Ananda was about to die, he decided to spend his final moments in Vesali, as you can see from the map here, instead, and travel to the river Rohini. When Ananda was crossing the river, he was followed by King Ajatasattu, who wanted to witness his death and was interested in his remains as relics. Venerable Ananda had once promised King Ajatasattu that he would let him know where he would die. So that's why King Ajatasattu knew, and he followed him. And accordingly, Venerable Ananda had informed the king. So that's a bigger map. So on the other side of the river, however, a group of Lichavis from Vesali, remember he went to Vesali, so a lot of these people, Lichavis from Vesali, also waited for him for the same reason. In the Pali, there were also two parties interested, but the two parties were the Sakyan and the Korean clans. He realized that his death on either side of the river could anger one of the parties involved. So to be fair, in order to do justice, Venerable Ananda chose a way to die in keeping with his gentle nature. Through a supernatural accomplishment, he therefore surged into the air, to levitate. Levitate means to levitate up, and meditate in mid-air, making his body go up in fire, with his relics landing on both banks of the river, or in some versions on the account splitting into 4 parts. After the passing, King Ajasatu built a stupa on top of the Venerable Ananda's relics at the river Rohini, or according to some sources, the Ganges. The Lichavis had also built a stupa at the side of the river. So this in blue color, just an additional information, the Chinese pilgrim Xuanzang from the 602 to 604 CE later visited the stupas on both sides of the river Rohini. Okay, Fasian also reported having visited stupas dedicated to Venerable Ananda at the river Rohini, but also in Mathura. So there was such a case. Basically, there was a record. After the passing, the elders who compiled the subsequent recension of the canon added 3 verses to his collection. Of great learning, bearer of the Dhamma, the guardians of the great seer treasure, Ananda, the eye of the entire world, has attained the final Nibbana. Of great learning, bearer of the Dhamma, the guardians of the great seer treasure, Ananda, the eye of the entire world, was a dispeller of gloom in the darkness. The seer who was so retentive, of keen memory and resolute, the elder sustaining the true Dharma, Ananda, was a mine of gems. So, Venerable Ananda's spiritual lineage played an important role in transmitting the original teaching in the 1st century, because he spoke at the first council after the Buddha passed away. But at the second council, 6 of his 8 monks chosen to attend were his disciples. Because he lived longer than most of the other elder disciples, Venerable Ananda disciples were among the elders and most revered almost 100 years after the Buddha's Maha Pajapati. So now I've concluded Venerable Ananda. So a lot of appendices here is the previous accounts of his previous life, personal life, the trial of Venerable Ananda, the lesser and minor rules, highest penalty on Chana, the first Buddhist council, the result of the first council. I'm sure you have studied this in the previous, but just in case, there are some information here for your own review. Okay, so now there's a past year's exam questions. Explain, what is it? Explain clearly the qualities and duties of Venerable Ananda as the Buddha's attendant monk until his final attainment of Maha Parinibbana. So this question is quite similar, and it appeared in 2016 or in question 8, 2016, and repeat in the following year, 2017. No such question in 2018, but it appeared in 2019. Nothing else until 2020. Right? So here is it. Explain clearly the qualities and duties of Venerable Ananda. So in these slides, you have plenty of information there for you to write a short essay, right? Okay, and if you feel that you want to write more, there's a lot of information. I'm sure you have these textbooks, right, from the Buddhas and his teaching by Venerable Narada, the Green Book, as well as the Manual of Buddhism, and also the Great Disciples of the Buddha, edited by Bhikkhuni. So there's a lot of information there for you to write on Venerable Ananda. All right, so I need to keep to the time because we're supposed to end at 4 o'clock. So now let's go to lecture 2. Right. So if you don't mind, I may steal a few minutes of your time. But like I said, If you need to leave at 4 o'clock, please, you're welcome to do so. Well, lecture 2, Maha Pajapati Gotami. Right, so I have 25 slides on Maha Pajapati Gotami, right, and which also includes the Bhikkhuni order. So we have the introduction. Right. Tradition says Maya and Maha Pajapati Gotami were Korean princes and sisters of Supabada. You can see from this chart here. Maha Pajapati Gotami, or in short Pajapati, was both the Buddha's maternal aunt and adoptive mother, raising him after his sister Maya, the Buddha's birth mother. Right? She raised Prince Siddhartha as if he were her own child. She was the first woman to seek ordination for women, which she did from Gautama Buddha directly. And she became the first Bhikkhuni. Right? Maha Pajapati died at the age of 120. An eminent Theri, Maha Pajapati was born at Devadaha. As the younger sister of Maya, both sisters married to King Suddhodana, leader of the Sakya. Right? When Maya died 7 days after the birth of Bodhisattva, the Buddha to be, Pajapati looked after the Bodhisattva and nursed him. She raised the Buddha, right, or rather the Bodhisattva, and her own children, Siddhartha's half-sister named Sundari Nanda and half-brother Nanda. Right? So Sundari Nanda and Nanda are biological children of Pajapati. Prince Siddhartha, Prince Nanda, Princess Sundari Nanda, the grandson Rahula, and daughter-in-law Yasodhara were all equally loved and treated by Maha Pajapati Gotami. So now let's look at the background brief history of the biography of Maha Pajapati Gotami. King Suddhodana's chief consort was Mahamaya, with whom he had Siddhartha's Gotama, who later became known as Sakyamuni, or the sage of the Sakyas, or the Buddha. Mayas married King Suddhodana, the ruler of the Sakya clan of Kapilavatthu. He was the daughter of King Suddhodana, uncle, and therefore his cousin. His father was king of Devadaha. Maya, the Buddha's mother, and Maha Pajapati Gotami were sisters and were both Korean princesses. They were sisters of Supabuddha. At the time of her birth, right, Agus prophesied that she would have a large following. Right? Hence, she was named Maha Pajapati Gotami. Both Maya and Maha Pajapati Gotami married the leader of the Sakya. Maya died shortly after Siddhartha was born. The king next elevated to chief consort Maya's sister, Maha Pajapati Gotami, with whom he had a second son, Nanda, and daughter Sundari. Right? So both children also became Buddhist monastic. When Maya died on the 7 days after the birth of Prince Siddhartha, Maya Gotami looked after him, nursed him as well, took care of him along with her own children. So, requesting for permission for ordination of women. After the death of King Suddhodana, as both Princess Siddhartha and Nanda had renounced the world, she also decided to enter the noble order and lead the holy life. When the Buddha visited Kapilavatthu to settle a dispute between the Sakyas and the Koliyas with regard to the irrigation of canals from the river of Rohani, the Kosambi River Sutta, and was residing at the Nikrodharama, Maha Pajapati Gotami approached the Buddha and begging him to grant permission for women to enter the orders and pleaded thus, "It would be well, Lord, if women should be allowed to renounce their homes and enter the homeless state under the doctrine and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata." Without stating his reason, the Buddha straightaway refused, saying, "Enough, O Gotami, let it not please you that women should be allowed to do so." For the second time, the third time, she repeated the request and the Buddha gave the same reply, "Enough, O Gotami." Later, the Buddha, having stayed at Kapilavatthu, journeyed to Vesali and arriving there in due course, resided at the Mahavana in Kutagarasala. Right? So as you can see from this map, Kapilavatthu to Vesali. Right? So she was very determined lady. So without discourage, cut off her hair and wear yellow garments and accompanied by 500 ladies, and she walked from Kapilavatthu to Vesali. for a distance over 382 miles. Right? Here it says 1 yojana, right? 1 yojana is actually 50 yojanas. So 1 yojana in a Vedic measure of distance that was used in the ancient India. So 1 yojana is equivalent to 7.64 miles. As you can see, you count 382 miles. So they walk, right? Walk through jungles, forests, right? Unpaved, roads. So, and barefooted, right? So it's not easy, huh? So then, having stayed in the place for so long and not used to walking long distance, the women looked tired and haggard. So this one you can read at your own leisure. Nigrodharama was a banyan grove near Kapilavastu, right? Where a residence was provided for the Buddha when he visited the first year of his enlightenment. So no, when Venerable Ananda noticed Maha Gotami in such a pathetic plight at the gate, so they arrived at where the Buddha resided. So they stayed at the gate, and so happened Venerable Ananda came out, and he came to her and inquired, "Oh dear stepmother, why do you look so miserable? Have the royal relative of the Sakya and Kolya families met with tragedies and are ruined? Why are you in unsightly appearance such as this, with swollen feet and looking shabby, a grief-stricken face, standing helplessly and weeping at the gate?" Maha Pajapati replied, "O Venerable Ananda, we have been standing at the gate with tears for failure to get the Buddha's permission for women to receive formal ordination, so that they might lead the life of bhikkhunis in the dispensation of the Dhamma Vinaya." Right. So if I put a footnote 2 here, you can read from the great Chronicles of the Buddha in chapter 25, page 619 to 622. Okay. So then Venerable Ananda said, he was moved by the sight, out of compassion, decided to intercede, right, and told her at the gate, "Wait here until I come back," and appealed to the Buddha and repeated the request 3 times. And the Buddha refused. The most exalted Buddha, right, Ananda said, the most exalted Buddha, stepmother, Maha Pajapati Gotami, is standing at the gate, right, with her feet swollen, her body covered with dirt and dust, her heart sore, tears streaming down her cheek, and in a miserable plight for failure to obtain your permission for women folk to receive formal ordination, so that they might lead the life of bhikkhunis within the sasana. May I pray solemnly that they be granted your permission, right, for receiving the formal ordination. Okay. Then the Buddha said in response, "That is not a proper thing, dear Ananda, and I advise you not to be interested in the matter of admitting women folk in the order of bhikkhunis." Then Venerable Ananda put the request in an indirect method, and respectfully he asked the Buddha, "Most exalted Buddha, could women folk attain Aryaship ranging from the fractional stage of Sotapati, Sakadagami, Anagami to Arahata by leading the life of bhikkhunis within the framework Dhamma Vinaya?" And then the Buddha replied, "Ananda, women folk could attain Aryaship, right? Stage of Sotapati, Sakadagami, Anagami to Arahata by leading the life of bhikkhunis within the framework of Dhamma Vinaya and Sasana." So this is an excerpt from the Buddha Net. You can read at this at your own leisure. So then Venerable Ananda here brought forth 2 arguments. Most exalted Buddha, if women folk were capable of attaining the 4 stages of Aryaship by way of their being bhikkhunis within the framework of Dhamma Vinaya Sasana, may I submit a case that is worthy of the Tathagata's sympathetic consideration in support of my request. Most exalted Buddha, Maha Pajapati Gotami had rendered service to you besides being your stepmother. She was responsible for feeding, nursing you, and for your physical and mental well-being ever since the time of your Buddha. She used to tidy you up by showering with scented water twice a day. Indeed, she was responsible for feeding you exclusively with the milk that flowed from the breast. So then Ananda replied, "Most exalted Buddha, I humbly pray for favor of granting your permission for the women folk to receive ordination of bhikkhunis within the framework of Dhamma Vinaya Sasana. So it's important to listen to the dialogue, the conversation. How did it happen? Then the Buddha finally accepted, right? And Ananda, if Maha Pajapati accepted 8 special rules, the Garu Dhamma, let such acceptance mean her admission to the order. So finally the Buddha accepted. So then whenever Ananda learned the 8 special rules from the Buddha, so he quickly returned to the Maha Pajapati at the gate, and then told her what had transpired, and he gladly accepted the 8 rules. Okay. Tan Chiu Mei, sorry, could you please unmute your mic? Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So whenever Ananda learned the 8 rules, so he said, most exalted Tathagata, Maha Pajapati Gotami has vowed. So he returned back to the Buddha and he said, most exalted Tathagata, Maha Pajapati Gotami has vowed to adhere strictly to the 8 special rules as laid down by the Buddha, with due diligence and respect up to the end of her life. So she vowed that she will adhere strictly to the 8 Garu Dhammas. So then Maha Pajapati Gotami went to the Buddha and set a suitable place and with due respect and asked, exalted Buddha, what should I do with the 500 princesses of royal birth? Right? So he came with 500 second ladies. So then he went to the Buddha, what happened to them? So then the Buddha gave her certain instructions. She left after hearing the Dhamma and making obeisance to him. Okay, so the next one, then the Buddha told the bhikkhus, right? So the Buddha told the other bhikkhus about his instructions to Maha Pajapati and laid down the following rules. Bhikkhus, I gave permission to bhikkhus to help in ordination of female candidates to become bhikkhunis. Now, in this case, the Buddha did not ordain Maha Pajapati Gotami. The Buddha gave permission to the bhikkhus, and he gave permission to the bhikkhus to help in ordination. So the bhikkhus proceeded to help in ordination of the 500 royal princesses, with Maha Pajapati Gotami as the preceptor, Upajaya. They were known as Ekato Upasampanna. There being insufficient number of bhikkhunis to participate jointly with bhikkhus in the ordination of ceremony. Remember, you need about 5, but Gotami only 1. So it's insufficient. So the other monks came in to help in with the ordination. When the ordination ceremony was over, Maha Pajapati Gotami attained fruition stage of arahantship through hearing Sankita Sutta. Right? Sankita means in brief. Right? Is in Anguttara Nikaya 8.53. Good will, mindfulness, and concentration. And the 500 bhikkhunis attained Aryaship according to their wishes, ranging from Sotapati, Satakagami, Anagami to Arahanta through hearing the Nandako Vada Sutta. Right? Nandaka, extortion. Nandaka was actually a bhikkhu. So the Buddha sent this monk by the name of Nandaka to give a discourse to the 500, bhikkhunis. So upon hearing this, right, then Maha Pajapati has attained the Sotapati, right, the fruition stage of arahantship. Whereas the others, right, they have various degrees according to their deeds. So Venerable Nandaka was instructed by the Buddha to give, this is the one. So he taught them on the impermanence, anicca, and what is impermanent will cause sufferings or dukkha, and also the 7 enlightenment factors. So that was what he taught. So what are the 8 Garu Dhammas? Now, remember this. This one you need to try to remember because this is part of your exam questions. The 8 Garu Dhammas, translated as rules of respect or principles of respect. Right? So what are they? Let us go through. Number 1. Okay, a bhikkhuni, even for 100 years, should salute the bhikkhu, rise up before him. Rise up before him, reverence him, and perform all proper duties towards him, though he had received the higher ordination that very day. So this is self-explanatory. Even a young bhikkhu has been ordained for one day, right? And even the bhikkhunis, I need to rise up before him, reverence him. A bhikkhuni, number two, a bhikkhuni must not spend a retreat or vasa in a place where there is no bhikkhu. 3. Every fortnight, a bhikkhuni should ask from the order of bhikkhus the time of observance, upasaka, meeting, and when a bhikkhu would come for the exhortation, or they call it bhikkhuno vada. Number 4, the pavarana ceremony after the retreat should be held by a bhikkhuni in the presence of both the bhikkhus and bhikkhunis to inquire whether through any of these three ways of seeing, hearing, or suspicion a wrong has been done. 5. A bhikkhuni who has committed a major offense should undergo manaka, discipline in the presence of the order of both bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. Manaka means panas imposed for sanghadisesa offenses. 6. A female novice or sikhamana who is trained in the 6 rules for 2 years should receive the higher ordination from the order or upasampada of both bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. 7. A bhikkhuni should on no account rebuke or abuse a bhikkhu. 8. Henceforth, a bhikkhuni should not give admonition to bhikkhus, but a bhikkhus should admonish bhikkhunis. These rules are to be revered, reverenced, honored, and respected as long as life lasts and should not be transgressed. So, meaning that these rules are here to stay until now. Right? So, I hope that you will give some time for you to go through these 8 Garudhammas, which is quite important, pretty much self-explanatory there. Right? So, please go through. Then, the Buddha's reason for refusal. Right? In founding the order of bhikkhunis, the Buddha foresee the future repercussions. Why was it in the first place the Buddha refused? There must be a reason. Right? So, here it says, if Ananda, so now the Buddha tried to explain to Ananda, if Ananda, women had not obtained the going forth from the household life into homelessness in the Dhamma and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata, referring to the Buddha, the spiritual life would have been of long duration. The good Dhamma would have stood firm even for 1,000 years. However, Ananda, because women have gone forth from the household life into homelessness in the Dhamma and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata, now the spiritual life will not be of long duration. The good Dhamma will last only 500 years. Let's read further. The Buddha added, just as Ananda, prowling burglars easily assail those families that have many women and few men. So in whatever Dhamma and discipline, women obtain the going forth from the household life into homelessness, that spiritual life does not last long. Right? Just as Ananda, a man might build causeway around a large reservoir as a precaution so that the water would not overflow. So too, as a precaution, I have prescribed for bhikkhunis the 8 principles of respect as things not to be transgressed as long as life lasts. Okay, why this phrase, this mili here? Right? As you can see, during those days, robbery and sexual abuse were also in common in those days. Right? So, meaning Buddha gave the 8 Dhamma, the 8 Garudhammas, simply because for the protection of the bhikkhunis. Right? And it's not because that, bhikkhunis or the female women folks, they are not as good as, as the men's folk, going, how should I say, going forth from the household into the homelessness in the Dhamma. It's not that, right? But because of the safety. Right, let's read more. In making these comments, which may not generally be very pleasing to womankind, the Buddha was not in any way making a wholesale condemnation. Right? The Buddha did not condemn of women, but was only reckoning, right, with the weakness of their sex. Lord Buddha's initial reluctance, you can see Lord Buddha's initial reluctance to accept female into the order is for practical reasons. Right? The practical reasons are social, patriarchal environment. Right? Problem of accommodation, as it is not so safe for the women to live in the wild. How can you allow a woman to go to the forest and be alone, right, in the wild? Problem of protection against men and beasts in the wild. Right? So it is just this simple reason, right, that the Buddha's initial reluctance. Right? During those days, the social are basically, how shall I say it, social patriarchal environment. What is that? He laid down these rules to ensure healthy continuation of the monastic institution rather than to assert spiritual dominance of monks over nuns. Buddha wanted at the formative period. Remember, the Sangha was only formed not long ago. I believe that it was only about five years. I believe so. So, but because the Bhikkhunis came later, so because the Bhikkhu order, the monks order, was just newly established, and because of this, the monks were entrusted with the task of conferring higher ordination of nuns, and the nuns were instructed to discipline themselves in this precept. So this is a Gotami. Oh, this one I have to explain to you. This is taken from notes from commentaries from the how shall I say it, the excerpt from translated by Bhikkhu Bodhi. By this, he shows the following. When a causeway is not built around a large reservoir, whatever water would have remained there if the causeway had been first been built does not remain because there is no causeway. So too, these principles of respect have been described in advance before an incident has arisen. See, the Buddha was very, very intelligent. He already prescribed this in advance. For the purpose of preventing transgression. If they had not been prescribed, then because women have gone forth, the good Dharma would have lasted 500 years. But because they have been laid down in advance, it will continue another 500 years and thus last for the 1,000 years originally stated. And this expression, 1,000 years, is said with reference to Arahants who have attained the analytic knowledges. Following this, another 1,000 years, there appeared dry inside Arahants. For another 1,000 years, non-returners. For another 1,000 years, once returners. And for another 1,000 years, stream enterers. Thus, the good Dharma of penetration will last 5,000 years. The Dharma of learning will also last this long. For without learning, there will be no penetration, and as long as there is learning, there is penetration. So from this above, we can see that according to the commentary, the allowance of women to go forth will not shorten the lifespan of Dhamma. This is because the Buddha has laid down the 8 principles of respect. Now, what does this mean? It will last now 5,000. You can see what is the number of thousands right now. It's 2,600 over years, right? From the parinirvana of the Buddha. So the first 1,000 already lapsed. So the first 1,000, there were Arahants, right? So which means in this century, right, to become an Arahant will be quite a challenge. Then the second 1,000, right, this one is the non-returner, also quite challenging. So now we're in between the 2,600 to 3,000 thousand years, the third, meaning to say is that it is still possible in this century that will become a once returner and another stream enterers is still possible. Right. So this is what it says, that the Dhamma will last 5,000 years. The first 1,000 already gone. Arahants, not possible. And then the second 1,000 already gone. Right? So that's the the non-returners also hard to say, not so possible. But then the once returner and stream entrance in this century, quite possible. So although the several valid reasons the Buddha reluctantly permitted women to enter the order, it should be stated that it was the Buddha who, for the first time in the history of the world, focused on order of women with rules and regulation, just as he appointed two chief disciples, Arahant Sariputta and Moggallana, for the order of monks. Two chief female disciples, Arahant Khema and Upalawana, were also appointed for the order of nuns as well. Women were placed under unfavorable circumstances before the advent of the Buddha, and this new order was certainly a great blessing. The establishment of order of nuns with rules and regulation was the opportunity for women that Buddha offered for the first time in the history. No other religious leader had given such a high religious position for women. The Bhikkhuni Sasana was founded in the 5th Vasana year of the Buddha. So Venerable Ananda showed special care and effort to look after all four kinds of disciples. What are the four kinds? The four, there are the monks, the nuns, the laymen, and the laywomen. Without him, in fact, there might have been only three kinds of disciples, for he was the one who was instrumental in founding the Bhikkhuni Sangha as reported in the Vinaya Pitaka. Following the Buddha's proclamation of the rules and regulations for nuns, Venerable Ananda asked him about the qualities of bhikkhu, right? Should possess to be agreed upon as the extorter of bhikkhunis, right? So what was the qualities? So the Buddha said, Ananda, a bhikkhu should possess 8 qualities to be agreed upon as an extorter of bhikkhunis. What are the 8? Teacher of bhikkhunis. What are the 8? So this is under Ovada Sutta, an advisor for nuns. You can read in AN 8.52. The 8 qualities of a teacher of a bhikkhunis. The teacher of nuns must be virtuous, have comprehensive knowledge of the Dhamma. He must be well acquainted with the Vinaya, especially the rules for the nuns. He must be a good speaker with a pleasant and fluent delivery, flawless in pronunciation, and intelligibly convey the meaning. He should be able to teach the Dhamma to the nuns in an elevating, stimulating, and encouraging way. He must also be welcome to the nuns and liked by them. That is, they must be able to respect and esteem him not only when he praises them, but especially when there is an occasion for reproach. He must never have committed sexual misconduct with a nun. He must have been a fully ordained Buddhist monk for at least 20 years. So who put in the bill? None other than Arahant Ananda. Reason for Buddha to grant permission to the establishment of order. Firstly, Lord Buddha granted permission to let her go forth based on the recognition of spirituality equality, right? That is different from Brahmanism, right? This Brahmanism, another sect. That is women who, after going forth, also capable of attaining enlightenment. Secondly, Venerable Ananda told Buddha that Maha Pajapati Gotami had rendered her services as aunt as well as foster mother, guardian, and witness after the Buddha's own mother had passed away. Right, so this you can read from this Maha Vacha Gota Sutta, the long sutta about Maha Vacha Gota in MN73. Right, so this is very interesting here. This sutta in DN 16, the chapter of Venerable Ananda asking a question to the Buddha. How shall we relate to women, Lord? Do not look at them. But if we see one, Lord, do not address her. But if one talks to her, keep to mindfulness and self-control. So I find it's quite cute. Maha Pajapati Gotami Terry, the foremost Bhikkhuni and her Parinibbana. So now we come towards the end. So we're almost finishing, so please bear with me. On one occasion when the Buddha was residing at the Jetavana monastery and naming foremost Bhikkhuni, he declared, Bhikkhus, among my Bhikkhuni's disciples who are of long standing in the order, Maha Pajapati Gotami is the foremost, Etagadaga. When Maha Pajapati Gotami learned about the impending parinibbana of the Buddha, right? Even before the Buddhas passed away, so she knew. She went to meet the Buddha. She shared that she didn't wish to live without the Buddha, and hence she wishes to leave the world before the Buddha's Mahaparinibbana. So the Buddha gave his approval in a stanza. Then she asked permission of the Sangha. The Venerable Rahula, right? She even asked, right, before the grandson, right? Rahula, Ananda, and Nanda, even his son, to approve of a passing away in two stanza, describing the banefulness of sentient existence. The Venerable Rahula and Nanda, who were then Arahant, took the words of the great Terry, right? Because they were Arahant, they took the words of the great Terry as inspiring emotional religious awakening. But as for Venerable Ananda, who was still training himself for Arahantship, they caused much sorrow and lamentation. He expressed his grief in a tansa, and the great Terry placed her nephew with words of wisdom. Therefore, Buddha requests Gotami Terry in the following verse to display her supernormal powers. Okay? Gotami, for the sake of those who have doubts about female devotee attaining Arahant enlightenment in my teaching, to enable them to shed those doubts, right? Gotami, display your supernormal powers. So the 120-year-old Bhikkhuni, Maha Pajapati Gotami, comply the Buddha's instruction by showing her supernormal powers, such as from being one to become many, being one to become many, from being many to become one, to become visible and to become invisible, to pass through a wall or a mountain. Then she walked in mid-air, holding Mount Meru as the prop on which the great earth rested as an umbrella, and turning upside down this miraculous umbrella. She created an atmosphere of intense heat as when 6 suns arise simultaneously. Having complied with the Buddha's request, she came down, making obedience to him, sat in a suitable place, and said, Venerable Son. Now she referred to the Buddha as Venerable Son. I, your stepmother, is 120 years of age. I have grown old. I have lived long enough. May I allow to die? The audience, stunned by the miraculous powers displayed by Gotami Terry. Then the 500 bhikkhunis, along with it, remember his 500 bhikkhunis, rose up in the sky as a cluster of stars, captivating the eye of the audience, displayed the supernormal powers. And having obtained the Buddha's approval to end their feats, they made obeisance to him and sat down in a suitable place. They recounted to the Buddhas in verses how much they owe to Gotami Terry. Then they asked the Buddha's permission to pass away. And the Buddha told them, Bhikkhunis, you know the time to pass away. After the parinibbana of Maha Pajapati Gotami, the Buddha had a stupa built by the Lichavi prince and the relics enshrined, and the Buddha himself joined the funeral procession. This was a unique honor paid by the Tathagata. The Buddhas, addressing the Bhikkhu Sangha and laity, declared that Venerable Maha Pajapati Gotami was foremost in attainment among the female Maha Arahants in the noble order. Right? Such an honor, right, for the Buddha, right, to attend the funeral. Status of female Buddha's time. Right? The status of the female 2,600 years ago, remember we talked about the 5,000 years of the Buddha dispensation. Now it's already 2,600 over years ago. The society was mainly patriarchal, meaning a social system dominated by men. That is the meaning of patriarchal. The birth of a male newborn was a joyful occasion and was lifted for all the world to see and perform special mantras and rites for obtaining a male child. But the birth of a female was not a happy one. The midwife could quietly keep the female newborn aside. Neither mantras nor rites were performed. The female child received no education at all, unlike the brothers of the upper three castes, who were schooled in Vedas. These are the Brahmins. The females were treated in the same status of the Sudras, the low caste. They were not allowed to learn the Vedas, and they had no need for religious learning. According to Manusmriti, if I pronounce it correctly, the Hindu law code, around 500 to 300 BCE, devotes the 9th chapter entirely to laws pertaining to women. And it says, women does not need to perform sacrifices of religious rites. Obedience to husband alone is sufficient for them to be born in heavens. Right, so they live to serve the husband only. Right, that's what is stated there. Right, this is in the kindred saying. Here are the few words: Sanskrit, the spelling of Sanskrit and Pali. Brahmin, Brahmin. Kshatriya, Atiya. Vaishya, Veda. Sudra, Sudha. And Dalit, Dalit. So this is for your information. Okay. Even King Pasinadi, the king, famous king, royal patron, the wealthy king of Kosala, was visibly upset when told that Queen Malika had given birth to a female. Then the Buddha was said to have consoled him. So the Buddha consoled the king and told the king, a woman child, O Lord of men, may prove even better offspring than a male. For she may grow up wise and virtuous, her husband's mother reverencing true wife. The boy that she may bear may do great deeds and rule great realms. Such a son or noble wife becomes his country's guide. Just as Prince Siddhartha. So this is Manusmriti. So you can read this. Female are to be guarded. Women are born of evil, it says. Women are described as the greatest temptation. Married lives of women, even though their husbands are unfaithful, they would still to serve them like gods. Polygamy was practiced. Female was confined to the household life. So that was their way of thinking. So more information about that, so you can read all about that. And lastly, appendices. So this one is more on Maha Pajapati Gotami aspiration and good deeds. How she became Maha Pajapati through that. So you can read about that. A lot of pictures of this. This is what Mani Karnika Ghat is one of the holiest cremation grounds among the sacred river fronts. The river fronts is considered as ghats alongside the river Ganges in the city of Varanasi. So Varanasi is a city on the Ganges River in the Indian state of Uttar Pradesh. Very colorful. So then this again, the appendices, you can read all about this. And another life of Maha Pajapati Gotami, and also her last life before she became the Maha Pajapati Gotami. So this reference list you can get from this information, or if I have listed here below, then you can you can refer to the text. Okay, so then past exam questions. Right, now, who nursed the infant Bodhisattva after his mother? I'm sure you know the answer already. Queen Mahamaya passed away. What role did she play in the formation of the Bhikkhuni Sangha? So here we're referring to Maha Pajapati Gotami. Then there's another question. This is 2018-2021. So 2022, nothing. 2023, nothing. Then here, explain clearly the qualities and duties of Venerable Ananda as the Buddha's attendant monk until his final attainment of Mahaparinibbana. This one here, trace the event that leads to the establishment of the Bhikkhuni Sangha. What significance does the order of nuns have the status of women in India at that time? So give some thoughts about these questions over the weekend. You still need to read a lot more to understand. So one session of this slide may not necessarily be sufficient or adequate for your understanding. So I really encourage you to read more about that. And then before we end, I just want to, just pay respect on that. Buddha Sasanang Chirang Tiktatu. Buddha Sasanang Chirang Tiktatu. Buddha Sasanang Chirantiktu. May the Buddha dispensation endure long. Huh? Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So now I think I have a question here, if you don't mind. Do you know what's the difference in age between Venerable Ananda and the Buddha? Interesting question, right? I may not have the correct question on this, right? Because there are various versions of it. Some versions say they are both age, right? Same age of the Buddha. Some say that Venerable, what do you call it? The Buddha is elder than Venerable Ananda. Right. So in this case, I'm sorry, I do not have the actual answer for you. Right. But it seems that if you look at the sutta, all right, and towards the Maha Parinibbana Sutta, it seems that the Buddha is much older than Venerable Ananda. Right. So I really hope that I'm able to help you with this. Right. But fortunately, there's no question about this in the exam. Right. So if you like, if you attend any Dhamma talk by any venerables, I think it'll be also good if you can ask any of the venerables who are more experienced and learned. Yeah. Okay. The next question. Please help to explain Rule 3 and Rule 8 of the 8 precepts imposed by the Buddha and the Bhikkhuni. Any more? Let me see. Yeah. Okay. 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 Now, over here, in future, you see this number here, 75, right? So if you have any question on any particular slide, so it will be good for you to jot down the slide and you say, refer to slide 75, and let's go through the question. So what was the question again? Question is Rule 3. Okay, now. Oops, sorry. Rule 3. Every fortnight, a bhikkhuni should ask from the order of bhikkhus the time of observance upasata, right? And the bhikkhu. Now, upasata is the the new moon day, a new moon day, 15 days of the month, the new moon day. So that is the time of the observance. So every fortnight. So if I'm not mistaken, what I learned from the Dhamma or Dhamma talk, before, the bhikkhunis, when it comes to the new moon day, they did not seek the advice from bhikkhus or anybody. They just decided, they thought that was the new moon day, right? So actually it was not. So then they made a rule to say that every fortnight, the bhikkhu should ask from the order of the bhikkhus, and they should seek the bhikkhus and the monks, yeah, the time of the observance. Okay, then, which means they should take the instructions I need to take this one. They should take the instructions from the bhikkhu. Okay, and when a bhikkhu would come for the exhortation, so after that, a bhikkhu will come to the place where the bhikkhunis place, and exhortation means they give a dhamma teaching, right? So then they will go and ask for the time of observance, and then when a bhikkhu, a teacher, will come and give them the exhortation, right? Will teach them that way. So how I learned this, I'm not a bhikkhuni, but I listened to this Bhikkhuni order, that there is one conference, a convention of the, what do you call it, the International United Theravada Bhikkhuni. That was also an interesting conference about this Bhikkhuni order. So that's why I learned, from this Bhikkhuni, and she explained how it works, right? The Bhikkhuni Novada. So they have to go and ask the bhikkhu, and then they have to ask when a bhikkhu is going to come and give exhortation, give teaching to the bhikkhunis. Okay, then the next one, Rule 8. Let me see. Rule 8. Rule 8. Bhikkhuni should not give admonition. Admonition means you cannot scold a bhikkhu, right? But a bhikkhu can scold Bhikkhuni. You cannot admonish. A bhikkhuni cannot admonish. No matter what you did wrong or whatever, you cannot admonish a bhikkhu. But a bhikkhu, even a young bhikkhu, can admonish a bhikkhuni. So these rules have to be revered, reverenced, honored, and respected as long as, it should not be transgressed. So I don't think it's terrible. I think, they're all well behaved, right? So I don't know. I'm not a bhikkhuni, so that way. All right. Any other questions?
So Rachel, these rules still apply till now?
Yes, they apply to now.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Why I heard about this? It's nice to hear your voice. Thank you. If you have any question, I think it'll be good to put up your video and let's have a chat. Yeah, I learned about this through this International United Bhikkhuni. And if any one of you are interested to to listen to this videotape, it's available. I can put it in the WhatsApp chat, huh? Right? You can take a look at it. Yeah, it's still until now. Question.
Sister Rachel,
Mm.
there's a question in the past year question say how long does the Bhikkhuni Sasana last? Is it 600 years?
Not the bhikkhuni, the how shall I say, the sasana, the bhikkhu, the Buddha sasana last, right? Remember
No,
just
it's
now
a Bhikkhuni. It
the
says
bhikkhuni.
Bhikkhuni.
Which slide is that?
I wanted the screenshot but cannot forward to you. Maybe I forward in the WhatsApp later.
Okay, no problem, no problem. But if I say bhikkhuni, then maybe I may rephrase that. It's actually what they say that when the Buddha mentioned to Ananda, if the women go forth, right? If the women go forth, right, the sasana will not last long. Is that the question? So remember the commentary which I showed you just now. What's the commentary which I showed you just now? Right? Like I say, if any one of you would like to leave, it's ready now coming to 4:30. Yeah. So you may do so. But if you like to stay on and I'm happy to let me see, or whether no. No, not this background. Wait, Garudama. Okay, this is the commentary. So at first I also thought, which means initially I also thought if they allow the bhikkhu, a bhikkhuni order, right? If they allow the bhikkhuni order, meaning to say that the Buddha sasana will not last long. So then I searched and researched, right? Many times I even asked, some during the Dharma talk. So eventually I came to this book in the Anguttara Nikaya, right? This is translated by Bhikkhu Bodhi. This is the commentary, commentary. Okay, before that, let me see. I want you to pay attention to this little box here. Okay, in the Vinaya, the monk's discipline, the Buddha is represented as saying this, but such a prophecy involving time is found only here. There is not other mentioned anywhere in the whole of the Vinaya, and the Sutta. This makes it suspect as an intrusion. The commentaries, as well as many other later Buddhist writings, have much to say about the decline of the Buddha's dispensation in 500-year periods. But none of this is the word of the Buddha and only represents the view of later teachers. Right? So I'm not too sure which sister asked me just now. So as you can see from here, right, it was not mentioned in any of the sutta or in the Vinaya. It's not stated there. Even if it's stated, right, it says here, right, it could be an intrusion, right, and only represents the view of later teachers, which means as an interpretation of later teachers, right? So that is the case. But remember just now, after the Buddha has given the eight rules, right? The Buddha said, because I have laid the 8 rules, Okay, because see here, however, Ananda, because women have gone forth, right, homeless in the Dharma. Okay, now the spiritual life will not be of long duration. The good Dharma will last only 500 years, right? Just as Ananda. Okay, so now this is a statement. So here now we say, just as Ananda, right, a man might build a causeway around a large reservoir as a precaution so that the water would not overflow. So too, as a precaution, I have prescribed for Bhikkhunis the 8 principles of respect as things not to be transgressed as long as life was. So meaning to say is that the Buddha has already, given the 8 rules as a protection. Okay, so say this is establishment. Okay, so that was the reason the Buddha has given the 8 the rules. If there is no rules, perhaps maybe, right? If there's no rules to protect the bhikkhuni and also to protect both sides, the bhikkhuni and the monks, then there will be some chaos. But because he laid very strict rules there, right? So that is a precaution. Just as a man might build a causeway. You know the causeway, right? It's a big reservoir. If you don't have a causeway, right, the water will overflow. So when the water overflow means trouble. So if the Buddha did not give the 8 Garudamas, then there'll be more trouble. Right? That's the reason why monks have got 227 rules. Bhikkhunis have 311 rules. Right? And most of it are quite similar to the monks' rules, except for a few additional rules for the Bhikkhunis, right? Which you can also learn about the Bhikkhuni orders in the Bhikkhuni rules. Okay. So I hope I
Thank
have.
you.
Okay, thank you. Very interesting. That is a question I also ask myself. So after researching wise, then I said, okay. So now I understand. So what is this? Question. Okay. Buddha said Maha Pajapati was the foremost attainment. Just wonder how was she not the chief? Oh, good question, but I don't think so. Anything is mentioned in the Vinaya or in the Sutta. But I suppose this is my own interpretation. I suppose, as you can see, she was already a mother, right, of Prince Siddhartha, and I'm sure that he's quite elderly. Right? So just as remember Venerable Anakondana. Venerable Anakondana was the first disciple. Why was it not a chief disciple? There's no answer. Okay, so I don't know. I don't have the answer for this, but I suppose that there are certain reasons, right, due to past karmatic. So remember Sariputta and Moggallana, they also have their past karma. So if Venerable Ananda died 20 years after Buddha's parinibbana, one slide, and died at the age of 120, another slide, does it mean that Venerable Ananda is 20 years older than the Buddha? Possibly. Remember, he said, there's one slide says that Venerable Ananda survived the Buddha another 40 years. Right? So, there you go. He survived another 40 years for that. Unfortunately, I don't think so. If any one of you came across any sutta or anywhere, if you can tell what is the age of Ananda, I'm not too sure why is it you're interested in Ananda's age, right? But I think it's very important that we drew deeper into the contents of the syllabus here, right? But it's interesting. I also like to know how old is Ananda. If the Buddha died at the age of 80, but he said he survived the Buddha at another 40 years old, another 40 years. You do the maths. I'm not so good at that. According to the Great Disciples of the Buddha, page 139, whenever I was born the same year. Like I say, Brother Benjamin, like I say, some sutta say they are the same way, some sutta didn't say. So in fact, I'm sure if you have come across any Dhamma talk, I also asked, I heard somebody ask also from some learned monks, they too cannot tell what exactly is the age, So what is the same age, whether they are same age or they are different age. Right? But don't worry about that, So as long as, but if the sutta say Ananda died at 120 years, which means there is a record of 120 years. If Maha Pajapati died 120 years, the Buddha died at the age of 80, there must be some record of that. Okay, but unfortunately, remember, now Buddha has got at least got a year which he was born, circa, right? 600 over BCE. But when it comes to Venerable Ananda, you see my earlier slide, we only refer Venerable Ananda only from the 5th to the 4th century, no particular year. Right? So we don't know. Okay. Okay, so I think that's all for the questions, right? Is there any other questions? Any
Sister
more?
Rachel, I posed a question in the WhatsApp group.
Oh, possible. Okay, what's it? Let me see. Hold on now. And you are sister?
Sister Teo, Chai Hun.
Mr. Teo Chai Hun. What was the question? Well, what should be the answer for Q20? Oh, let me see. What is Q20? What's that? How long did the Bhikkhuni Sasana last? What was the answer? Okay, anybody wants to do a poll? How long did the Bhikkhuni Sasana last? A, 300 years. B, 400. C, 500. D, 600 years. Which answer?
The Bhikkhuni Sasana is still around, why is it say last? How funny.
Yeah.
Or is it prediction or what?
Yeah. You see, this is according to what is the context. Right? I do not know who set the question here, but I'm not too sure also whether this question is correct or not. Honestly speaking, I'm not too sure whether this question, whoever set the question, is correct or not. Right? Yeah.
Okay.
But if you look at the other, just now when I mentioned, remember what the dialogue mentioned? I think it's 500 years, right?
Okay.
Yeah, that one, I would answer that. But yeah, thank you for highlighting this. You know what? One of these days, I'm going to ask Venerable Sumangala. You all know who is Venerable Sumangala, right? Do you all know? Anybody?
No, I don't know.
Venerable Sumangala, she was the moderator. Arya Vihara. Yeah, she was in Arya Vihara. One of these days, I'm going to ask her. Right. I'm going to ask her because I attend her full moon recitation at the site at Kwasa Damansara. So they had it there in the site, the open site, where they're going to build the first Bhikkhuni center in Malaysia. So any one of you interested to go and do some chanting there? Normally we do chanting of Dhammacakkavatthana Sutta at the site. Right? They have a site at Kwasa Damansara. And it's very nearby. You can walk from the Kwasa Damansara MRT station. So it's a very good meritorious deed if you come and do that. Yeah. If I have time, I'll go. It depending on the day. Every 15 of the month, we do the chanting there, right? Until until the building basically. So that'll be interesting for Bhikkhunis. Then there will be the first Bhikkhuni center in Malaysia. So how interesting. All right. So I've taken so much of your time already. Any other things? If not, shall we call it the evening, the day?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. If you have any questions, just let me know. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you.
Bye.